Senator Paul, your first question tonight comes from Heather.
Senator Paul, many feel that to broaden the appeal of its message, the Republican Party needs to take on a more populist message and reject the influence of special interests. What can the Republican Party do to reject its purported image as the party of big business bailouts?
Well, I think we do need to be a bigger party, and I've been saying we need to be bigger, better, bolder. But there is a debate in our party. Some say, well, we should dilute what we stand for. We should be Democrat light, and then we'll win elections. I think nothing could be farther from the truth. I think we need to be more boldly for what we are for. Included in that would be the things I learned as a kid. I met Ronald Reagan when I was a teenager. We traveled to the convention in Kansas City in 1976 because we were part of the grassroots against the establishment. But Reagan ran on making government smaller. Reagan ran on lower taxes. But I'll tell you, in Washington, most of the Republicans do not believe in lowering your taxes. Most of the Washington Republicans say, oh, we want revenue neutral tax reform. And I say, if that's what we're for, I'm going home. That means half of your taxes would go up and half of your taxes would go down, but the net effect would be zero. So to make our party bigger, we ought to be bigger, better, bolder for lower taxes, less regulation. Every Republican in Washington votes for the balanced budget amendment, but I actually put forward a budget that balances. And only about a third of the Republicans in the Senate had the guts to vote for a budget that balances, because guess what? It cut spending. We actually did what Ronald Reagan said he would do. We eliminated the Department of Education completely, the whole thing. But I have tried to take our principles to places Republicans haven't been going. I've been to Detroit. A month ago, I was in the south side of Chicago. I've been to Ferguson. I've been to Baltimore. I've been throughout the United States to our big cities saying, small government will help poverty. Small government, lower taxes will help you get jobs and create opportunities. School choice will help you to escape a bad school. I've been going to the cities with our message, not with a watered down message, but with our message. But I've also gone to the youth and I've said, you know what? We're a great party. We defend the Second Amendment, but we got to defend the Fourth Amendment, the right to privacy if you want to defend the Second Amendment. But I do think that we can take a bigger, better, bolder message to new audiences and bring them in. And for goodness sakes, we're going to have to. We think we can win with the people we have. In South Carolina, you're doing a great job. I commend you. However, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, there's 18 states we haven't won in 30 years. We're going to have to figure out how to take our message, not dilute it, but take our message to new audiences. I think I am the one who can do it. I can do it without diluting our messages, and I will get it done.
Senator Paul, some supporters of same-sex marriage are moving beyond their victory at the Supreme Court and seeking to pass laws that would coerce people of faith into participating in same-sex weddings. How should our society balance the goals of promoting fairness and respecting freedom of conscience?
This is kind of going on right now in my home state. You've read about the county clerk who she says because of her religious principles, she's not going to sign the documents. And there have been many people, in fact, most of the Republican candidates have said she should be punished. I've disagreed. I've said that it was a mistake to put her in jail because I think that they should accommodate, you should have the ability to opt out of laws that go against your religious beliefs. But I'm not talking about just defying the law. In Kentucky, we actually have a law called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. We passed it in 2013 precisely to give elected officials the ability not to participate in something they disagree with. I've always thought that marriage was a local issue. I don't want my guns or my marriage registered in Washington. The Hobby Lobby case was a victory for all of us. You have a Christian family who said that they did not feel that the government should compel them to provide money for something they objected to, abortion. And I love the way their attorney put it. Their attorney said that you shouldn't have to give up on your faith to remain in business, but nor should you have to give up on your business to remain true to your faith. What's happening is the government has grown too large in every level, not only in your business, not only in taxes, but in your personal life and in your religious affairs. And when the mayor of Houston sent a subpoena to ministers and said they wanted their sermons, you know what I say? That's when we should resist. I say defy them.
Senator Paul, our nation's murder rate is increasing in many of our major cities this year, and some blame what has been called the Ferguson effect, namely a less aggressive policing caused by a changing of the equilibrium between police and offenders. Last August, in the wake of the Ferguson shooting, you wrote, "When you couple this militarization of law enforcement with an erosion of civil liberties and due process that allows the police to become both judge and jury, we begin to have a very serious problem on our hand. Given these developments, it is almost impossible for many Americans not to feel like their government is targeting them," end quote. Senator, do you believe a Ferguson effect is responsible for any of the increase in murders?
We have a federal government that now has 48 federal agencies that have SWAT teams. The USDA has a SWAT team. They arrested an Amish farmer for the crime of selling milk from the cow. I told my father-in-law about this, and he grew up on a little farm in Kentucky, and he said, "Well, I drank milk from the cow since I was a baby till I was 20 years old." And he said, "The only thing we disliked about it was when the cow got into the onions." But your government might be too large if we're arresting people for selling milk, for goodness sakes. Fish and Wildlife has a SWAT team. Now, I can understand being out in the woods, you might have some people needing a gun. But the thing is, when they went into Gibson Guitar, took all their computers and arrested them, that is a government that's out of control. John and Judy Dollarite live in a little town called Nixa, Missouri. And they wanted to teach their son about starting a business. So he started a business selling rabbits. And as rabbits do, they multiplied. He was very successful until one day the USDA showed up and they didn't have the right permit. They had one permit, but they didn't have the correct permit according to the USDA. They began fining them, and I think at the end of 30 days, it was $90,000. But this was a government, and they wanted to be nice to the people, so they said you could pay with cash or credit card. If you don't pay, though, the government said that your fines within 30 days will be $3.1 million. So when the question is asked, have we over-militarized our government, our domestic government? Absolutely. We've over-militarized things. The specific program I was referring to in Ferguson has nothing to do with the shooting and was not a comment and is not a comment on the appropriateness of the shooting. My point was that I don't think we need tanks in our cities. I don't think we need 20-ton mine-resistant ambush protection vehicles in our cities. The program does a couple of good things, and I'm all for this. They give excess and older bulletproof vests from the military to our police. I'm all for that. But there are certain things that we are doing. We gave out 12,000 bayonets. What would we do with bayonets in our city? I mean, that's crazy. So, yes, we do have to be careful about it, and there is a difference between the Army and the police. And one thing I will tell you to commend the police is, I think the police every day do obey the Constitution. Better than your federal government always.
Senator Paul, with regard to the increase in murders that we're seeing in many of our major cities right now, Do you think that America is giving our police force the support it needs to keep us safe in our cities? Washington, D.C. has had more murders this year than it did last year.
I'm getting a lot of echo from you. Can you say it again? I'm getting a lot of echo.
Sure, no, I'm sorry. With regards specifically to the murder increase that we're seeing in so many of our cities, Washington, D.C. has had more murders this year than it did all of last year, Milwaukee and so on. Do you think that our nation's equilibrium has moved too far away from supporting the police towards a more kind of understanding equilibrium?
Yeah. The question is, have we tilted too much towards civil liberties and away from the restraints on government? When our founding fathers put the Constitution in place, they said one very important thing. They said the Constitution was to restrain the government, not the people. But as much as I'm a stickler for the Constitution, if you ask me, are the police generally doing a good job and do we need the police? Absolutely. But the police actually do use the Constitution every day. I'll give you an example. If in Greenville tonight there is thought to be a rapist in a house and the neighbors say, we saw him go in there 2 hours ago and we're pretty sure he's in there, the police don't just break the door down. The police stand on the front yard and they call a judge. It's the checks and balances, and they ask the judge for permission to go in. And you say, what, you don't trust the police? That's not it at all. I want the checks and balances so we don't have a bad person take over and abuse the law. Madison put it this way. Madison said that if government were comprised of angels, we wouldn't need any rules. But as you know, government's often not comprised of angels. The murder rate in our cities is complicated. We have a higher murder rate than other societies, much higher than in Japan or I think in China as well. It's complicated why we have a higher murder rate. It's societal, it's religious or lack of religious values, lack of family values, not all fixable, but we do have to have the police to protect us. And I'm all for that. And I think sometimes the stories where I would say the balance has gone too far in one direction is we hear all the bad stories and we're not hearing the good stories. In Tarrant, Alabama last year, there was a police officer who showed up and a woman had been caught shoplifting. She was 50 cents short on her eggs and her kids hadn't eaten in 2 days. And, you know, from all the stories you think, what's this mean old policeman gonna do? He bought the eggs for her. And then they went and they brought her food to her house. So the problem we have is the way the media reports it is all you hear about is something bad that happens, and I'm not excusing bad things, but I'm saying that's all we hear, and instead every day a policeman is helping a little old lady whose heat is off or air conditioning's off, or a little old man, I don't want to be sexist. But they're doing all kinds of good things in your communities, but we don't hear the good things, we only hear the bad things. So if there's a shift and a balance the wrong way, I think it's the way we report the news. But we do have to be vigilant, and there are bad people out there. In the same way we need a strong army, we also have to have a strong police force as well.
America's socialist senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders, said earlier this year that we should be talking about expanding Social Security benefits to make sure that every American can retire with dignity. You've spoken of the need to reform Social Security. How is it that we get to reforming Social Security and other entitlement programs when even some in our own party don't want to do it?
I was just hoping I'd get a Bernie Sanders question. All right, Bernie Sanders is offering you free stuff. He wants to give you free health care. He'd give you a free car. He'd give you a free house. But guess what? There is no free lunch. That just means somebody else is paying for it, but they're not showing you who's paying for it. It is a disservice to the country for Bernie Sanders to say he's going to give you all more Social Security and, you know, money's going to grow on trees and everybody will be rich and there'll be a chicken in every pot. The problem is Social Security is already short of money. For the last 5 years, Social Security pays out more than what comes in. Why? It's a simple demographic fault. People ask me, whose fault is it? Is it Republicans' fault or Democrats' fault? I say, nope, it's your grandparents' fault for having too many damn kids. After World War II, there were these big families. The baby boom happened after World War II. but then the baby boom didn't do their job. You didn't have enough kids. And then your grandkids didn't have enough kids. So what happened is we used to have 16 workers for every retired person. Now it's 3 workers for every retired person. And we're living longer. Now some of these are good things. Living longer, good thing. Less workers, smaller families, maybe a good thing, maybe not. But the thing is that Social Security is short of money. You can't promise people more money. You got to figure out how to make do with less money. But we can fix it. I have a bill that would actually fix Social Security. It's not fun, so I'll promise you, you're not going to love it. You have to gradually raise the age of the eligibility. For my age and younger, it just has to get a little older, a couple months every year, but it's got to go to 70 for Social Security and Medicare. And I know nobody wants to hear that, but the opposite is I come up and tell you, everything's okay. You can have whatever you want and it's free, but we're going to destroy the country if we do that.
I'd like to welcome back Governor Nikki Haley to the stage.
Thank you. Welcome back to South Carolina, Senator Paul. You know, I listen to you and I can hear your dad's voice a little bit when I hear you talk. So, and please give him our best while you're at it. What do you and your dad disagree on policy? What policies do y'all disagree on?
I think it's better to start out with what we do agree on.
And I know there's a lot that you agree on, right?
You know, my dad is a great man. I have a great deal of respect. I love my dad. There's probably, and you may not agree with everything he says or with I say or Nikki says either, but what I will tell you is he was honest. He was genuine, and he didn't tell you stuff just to tell you stuff. He told the truth. He believed that the Constitution restricted government. That government was restricted and that Article 1, Section 8 gives about 17, 18 powers to government. They shouldn't be doing anything else. Now, we're not exactly the same. No son is exactly the same as their father, and we occasionally will have some disagreements. I hate to go through a list, though, because it makes Thanksgiving a little bit uncomfortable. I'll tell you one, though, where we have a disagreement right now, and we try not to let it get between us, but I thought the Iran agreement was a mistake, and I voted against the Iran agreement. But I will tell you, though, I'm different than the other Republicans, and you may have heard this on the stage the other night. Some want to rip it up and tear it up and put it in a shredder and then stomp on it. Right now, I'd vote no. I think it's a bad agreement. But if I'm president in 2 years, the first thing I'm going to do is not to rip it up. I'm going to see if the Iranians are adhering to it. I mean, for goodness sakes, we should want peace. Now, I don't believe they will, and I don't think there's enough leverage in the agreement to force them to comply. But if for some reason in 2 years they actually are complying, why would we want to go backwards? So I think that's theatrics for the people who want to tear it up, because I think there is a possibility for peace. But I don't trust them. They've historically been dishonest, and I think you need leverage. And what I would have done is I would have kept the sanctions in place and very gradually over a several-year period take them off if they're in compliance.
Well, and thank you for that. And I think we can all say we are defined by our parents and the way they raise us. So not only do you have his voice, but it's always interesting because we all veer off a little bit from our parents. So thank you for that. You know, one of the things that you have done that I've found interesting is we had a very tough summer, naturally, with the things that happened in Charleston. You have done things that I think are very important to do, which is Republicans need to get out of their comfort zone. I think that they need to go speak to other people that aren't just Republicans. You have gone and spoken at Howard University in D.C. You went to Ferguson after the riots. Why did you do that? And what was your goal in making both of those trips or speeches? Or
Twofold. I kind of want to learn why people are unhappy. It doesn't give you a right to loot or to violence or anything like that, but I think it's a mistake for us not to at least listen. And the people I was listening to weren't the looters. I was listening to the African-American leaders in Ferguson who weren't looting, who had their businesses looted to find out something. But I have learned something, and I think this is important for us. And I tell people over and over in my speeches that while we're great on the Second Amendment, we need to be good on the Sixth Amendment. It says you have a right to a trial and a right to a trial by jury. And you say, well, certainly we're all for that. Well, I've had some debates with your other senator about some of this. But the thing is that I'll tell you one quick story, and I want you to at least think about this and think whether it brings out any sympathy for why people might be unhappy. Khalif Browder was 16 years old. He's a black kid from the Bronx. He was accused of a crime. Actually accused by somebody who wasn't legally in the country, fled and never testified. He spent 3 years in Rikers Island. 3 years. Can you imagine your kid 3 years on Rikers Island accused of a crime that he says he never committed? He was never tried. He spent 2 years in solitary confinement. He was beaten by gangs, and who else knows what happened to him there? But I can't imagine that happening to my kid. So when we think, oh, why are people angry? They've got no right to be angry. Think if it were your son. He tried to commit suicide in prison 3 times. He got out, and a month ago he did. He committed suicide, and he's gone. And I think we don't know that experience. So many of us don't know. We don't know what it's like to really be poor. We don't know what it's like to be in prison. And it's like, yeah, there are bad people in prison, but I think he got a raw deal, and you can see how people in his high school, his parents, might be unhappy with some of us or with not feeling like they're being treated right. And I'm not saying change what we're for. I'm just saying show some compassion, and let's be the party that's also for the Sixth Amendment, a speedy trial, the same we're for the Second Amendment.
Finally, I have a great respect for all of my governors, but some have made different decisions on Obamacare. Kentucky has not only expanded Medicaid, they've also done the state exchange. What results are they feeling from that, and what are you telling them to do as a state now that they've done that, which we have not done either one, by the way?
Well, congratulations on not doing
Thank you.
You know, our governor is a Democrat, and he thinks a little bit differently. He's kind of from the Bernie Sanders school. He thinks it's wonderful. He says in public, he says, oh, Medicaid expansion, it's a $15 billion influx. It's a $15 billion giveaway to Kentucky. And it's like, well, that would only be true if you don't pay any federal taxes, or if you don't believe that the deficit we're running up to pay for all these things matters. So you can offer stuff for free. He did set up a website. The website sort of works, although I tried to sign my son up and they signed him up for Medicaid. So the system, you can get something for free, you can get a website to make it for free, but nothing's really for free. Right now, the federal government's saying they'll pay for 90% of the Medicaid. Or actually, they're paying for all of it, and then it goes to 90%, but the 10% is going to be enough to bust our budget. But really, we shouldn't worry just about the 10% for the state. We need to worry about the 90% that all of us are paying as federal taxpayers, and it's really debt. We're not even paying for it. It's debt, and it's making us weaker as a country.
Tell your dad we said hello. Everyone, please thank
Thank you.
Senator Rand Paul.